a real, genuine spiritual experience, but at the same time, it was a sexual experience. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So this is very interesting to me, and I've been recounting lately stories like this in my life. My life is really funny this way, and I just had the privilege of being invited to. So now I live in Vermont. I lived in New York for 30 years, but um, just recently, just last week, I had been invited to be a part of a documentary series that's being filmed in New York City, and it's about four trans and queer elders in the community. So, they did a nationwide search and picked four people, and I was one of those people. So,
Aw.
yeah, I'm so excited. So what we did was we told our life stories, right? And so we would sit around and talk to each other and tell our stories, and you know and they filmed it all, and stuff. And so I've been thinking about this a lot because I was telling the story I just told, but also how Glenn and I got together was also very similar. Like there was a definite sexual attraction, kind of love at first sight kind of thing. And then the vast spiritual presence that Glenn was really drew me in. And of course, he literally was my guru and teacher and best friend and lover and everything else all rolled up into one. And so for me, there's a very real uh, path here that I think is a queer spirituality path. So I've been sort of um, doing that, thinking about that a lot. I actually wrote a sermon about it, which was the week before the episode that you saw, and I was really excited about this theme. So I think I'm gonna, pursue this a little more in my talks and things like that, that I do. So yeah, it's been strangely fascinating.
Yeah, no, I do find that there is this flow to life. I recently like did a segment, but it didn't turn out the way that I wanted due to editing stuff, and it's some of the same issues we were having earlier. I was having with the platform that I was on. Um, and one of the things that I was talking about that particular segment, which I might make it into an audio because it was just bad visually, is that I feel like there is a flow to life, right? In the
Yeah,
sense of how the seasons sort of come and go, how the ocean sort of like is an ebb and flow with the moon, right? So I feel like if we are paying attention to those various um signs or I think you said vibrations or
yeah,
energy.
yeah, yeah,
If we're paying attention to those, it really puts us in alignment of
yeah,
where we need to go. And I think
yeah,
that's sort of what you're sort of talking about. Like we also
yeah.
eventually end up. I don't necessarily think like we all end up there, but because I do think there are some people who are stunted. Like there are some people who are emotionally and mentally stunted because there's so much wounded. They're so
Yeah, there's a lot of
so
wounding. Yeah,
yeah, and so they can't get past that. And
yeah,
so they stop growing. But I do
right.
agree with you in general that we all end up in the same place. And so I love that story in the sense of like how everything sort of really connects.
Yeah, I think my journey has been understanding that everything is part of the spiritual journey. Everything, Um, and being human is not separate from being from being spiritual. I mean, however you want to say that. Um, we are, from my standpoint, we are spirit.
Yeah.
That's who we truly are. Having this human experience through this body, which also involves our thoughts and feelings. Um, And we're here to experience. That's why we're here, to experience. Experience what?
Yeah.
Whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever your path leads you to do. And I agree with you that many people, well, the way I say it would be they don't look past their own ego.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, there's the ego, uh, persona, which is why we refer to ourselves as me, a personal me. You know what I mean? So that's the egoic realm. Nothing wrong with it at all. Of course, we have to have the egoic realm to navigate and be a part of the three-dimensional reality that we live in. However, there is a place where the ego doesn't take us anywhere, you know, uh, other than just three-dimensional reality.
Yeah.
So if there's a belief that there's nothing more than this three-dimensional reality, then people can get really, what I see is that people get really caught in their thoughts,
Mhm.
and then if that's not healed or turned into something, or if it's not noticed that,
Mhm.
oh, these are my thoughts, they're not who I am, that's not the truth of my being. If that's not noticed, then that can be you can spiral down, you can go into depths of depravity, depression, whatever, and be very stunted. And we see that, generationally, like
Yeah.
men,
Yeah.
generationally, men have been taught to be stunted emotionally, which
Yeah.
affects your spiritual path. So even if you're paying an intellectual um, acknowledgement to spirituality, but if you're stunted and you can't feel your emotional life, then that's a block, which sometimes people never penetrate um until we leave the planet, and then who knows what happens after that, but yeah, it's interesting, so I always say this whole thing is like a paradox, because if you can't make peace with paradox, then it's really hard to function. We live as spirit through this ego body learning device experience, whose purpose, from the perspective of A Course in Miracles, is separation. That's the purpose of this shroud
Yeah.
that we call, Glenn used to say, meat sack.
It is a meat sack.
Yeah.
Years ago, I can't remember the name of the author right now, but years ago, I read this really, really good book called, and you may know this, A Conversation with God.
Oh yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
And if you remember the name of the author, sort of shoot it out. But like, I remember specifically how the author was sort of talking about sort of like this crisis that they were going through, sort of, really suffering and getting to a point where everything sort of just was still, and then they were able to hear God speaking to them
Yeah.
in a way that was subtle, right? In a way that was either having a conversation with somebody about an hour ago and something similar happening, 3 hours later from that point, right? Or thinking about somebody and then sort of like that person giving you a call that you haven't heard from
Yeah.
for about like 6 months to a
Yeah.
year, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then the thing that really stood out to me in this book, The Conversation with God, was how like the way that he described God, or the way that God was describing themselves to the author, was that I sent you out as an extension of me
Yes.
to
Yes.
to experience life and to sort of come back with
Hmm.
what you've learned.
Hmm.
So we are an extension of the divine. Like
Yeah.
I get goosebumps just thinking.
Yeah, I do too. I love it. That's what sets me on fire, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Because I feel that, I totally get that. And whatever experience you're having is part of that divine journey,
Yeah.
whether you recognize it or not. It's,
Right.
you don't have to. It's not required, you
Right.
know. But for me, I think it's fun to be conscious about it, you know.
And,
And
and I also think there is this sort of, going back to the sort of the tantra piece, right? There is sort of like this somatic aspect that needs to be tapped into to be able to not only tap into your emotionals, but also to sort of a spiritual aspect, right? Because
yeah,
it's through sort of somatic work that you're able to, integrate. And,
yeah.
I hesitate to say that, because I do agree with you. I think like we are separate, right? Like the body is separate from the environment, right? So like the person you love is separate from you.
Mhm.
I think it's designed in purpose that
Yeah,
way.
I do too. I really do think that's the truth of the matter of this plane of existence. Um, my understanding is that when we leave this plane of existence, leave our body behind, we merge into that oneness again, that divine energy, just pure, just as pure spirit. Um, and that's interesting. Um, Over the year that Glenn has, passed, I've been, it's really been deep for me. It's been really, really super deep. Um, I'm sure, you know, everybody has had this experience in one way or another with someone losing someone that they love so deeply, and it's such a thing, to reconcile, to make sense of. And sometimes you just can't make sense of it.
Yeah.
So you have to surrender to that. This is my journey. I've had to surrender to that which is bigger than me, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
bigger than this me, this little personal me. And it's not so much, oh, there's a reason for everything. It's sort of, that's a little too cliche, but
Mhm.
it's more like finding your path through your own personal tragedies, you know, and those tragedies can bring you to a different place of healing if you let them, or they can take you in the depths of bitterness and hate and whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've seen that temptation to go into the dark. I've seen that.
Yeah.
And it's my faith, that has made me willing. Sometimes I even say willing to be willing, to find the gift
Yeah.
in Glenn's passing.
Yeah.
Um, for a whole bunch of reasons. Because, our journey, we were together for 20 years. We bought this property. We were going to plan to do all kinds of things here on this property. And then, right before 2 months 3 months before we were going to move, he passed away. So I felt, betrayed and angry and all those things. Um, so many of us share these kinds of experiences where we've had things that are personal tragedies. So it's the path through that is where the enlightenment comes, if you want to use that word. I think for me, I'll say it that way. Yeah, you
Yeah.
know, and yeah. Anyway, I'm not sure how I got going in
Yeah.
that direction, but
No, no. Well, I think for me, right, like so, um, as a therapist, one of the modalities that I use is dialectic behavioral therapy, DBT.
yeah,
And one of the premises of the creator of this particular modality, Marsha Linehan, talks about duality, right? Like two things can be true. It
yeah,
doesn't necessarily mean that it feels good, right? Like
right.
I can be in love with somebody as well as hate them or be jealous of them, right? Like
Hmm. Hmm.
there can be injustices that happen, but at the same time, that uh sort of gets people together to create community, to make a difference, to keep that
Exactly.
injustice from happening. So
Right.
I think, like the sweetness about living is also the bitterness about that you will lose that,
Yeah.
the people that you love,
Yeah.
and being able to, like you said, be in a mindset, intentionally be in a mindset
Yeah.
of trying to see the lesson, trying to see the I don't know.
Yeah. Sometimes even just think it's just finding the way forward, like,
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
if I'm here, right, this is the way I look at it. If I'm HIV positive. I've been HIV positive since 1986 or somewhere like that, so I'm a long-term survivor. So when Glenn passed, I'm like, why you? I'm the one that's HIV positive, you know and we had no signs of anything that was wrong with his body or anything. He was strong up until the last 2 weeks of his life. He's super strong, like he would pick me up, like he was that. Um, so it's just, in many ways for me, it's just, what's the next step? How can I find my way through to the next step? You
yeah,
know?
yeah,
Um, and I kind of feel like that's the way for me personally to do it. Just like, okay, what's the next step? And like you were talking about the silence before, that's when I go into silence. I also want to say that a morning, my morning silent practice of meditation, or whatever you want to call it, you can say meditation, is just for me really being silent and letting my um, thoughts not mean anything, so to speak. Just, okay, here comes a series of thoughts. Okay, I'm just gonna sort of let them pass like the clouds, and just sit here in quiet, and I do that every morning for at least an hour. I mean, I have a wonderful meditation group, which is, so we do it together, so it's a little easier to be in meditation for an hour, with a group of people. But it really makes a difference. From the silence is where I find my next step. And I just kind of, that's kind of how I'm doing it right now. I'm not making big, huge future plans anymore. And I'm not trying to be, look at me, I do these things. Yay. Although, my path is as an artist. So an artist needs an audience. So, there, again, we're here in a paradox, right? So, like I'm just now starting on my 10th album. I have 9 albums of original music. And I'm like, at first I was like, what's the purpose? Like, why? You know? Well, why? So in the silence I understand that why is my healing. My healing. And these songs that Spirit has given me during this year of coping with the loss of Glenn, had been amazing. Like, quite